This is a video for people who have had a brain MRI. They were told everything was normal, but they're still having a lot of symptoms that they feel right around here. So this can be pressure at the base of the head. This can be dizziness. This can be vertigo. This can be blurry eyes. This can be chronic pain, chronic fatigue. This can be a whole bunch of different things. And this is honestly a video that I shouldn't have to be doing, where people are having to do their own research to figure out what's actually wrong with me. But I need to show you a few things that can sometimes show up on an MRI that can help point you in the right direction that oftentimes aren't reported. And the reason for that is because most of the time when a radiologist or a neurologist is looking at an MRI scan, they're looking for overt signs of pathology, broken bones, infections, lesions, things like that. They're not necessarily looking at functional disrelationships. This requires a lot more examination. And so I'm going to show just a couple of relatively basic measurements that you can do if you've had MRIs on your own. All right, what we have here is a midway slice cut through the brain here, and then the spinal cord in the neck as it comes down through here. And I'll point out that this person actually does have an observable problem going on. It's what's known as a stenosis. So this person has degenerative arthritis in their neck, and what it's doing, as you can see, is it's kind of indenting on the black thing. That's your spinal cord located right there. And you don't have the normal amount of fluid that's going along on both sides. So when pathologists, radiologists are looking for problems, they're looking for big stuff like this. But where we're going to focus our attention, it's going to be right up here at the interface where your skull meets your upper neck. All right, so you're going to want to find this big white thing here, and sometimes it's gray depending on the contrast here. Basically, find the base of the skull, and then you're looking for where that stops. So you're going to place a little dot kind of at the very back part of the skull where it's going to interface right above this structure here. It's called the cerebellum. It's responsible for balance coordination in the body. You're then going to want to look for the equivocal point over on the other side where you'll see this big giant triangle thing come to a point just like that. So these two dots here, they essentially represent the opening at the base of your skull from a front to back perspective. What you also want to do then is follow that bony ridge up like this a little bit. You don't have to go all the way up to the top. Going simply up to somewhere around here, that's going to be sufficient. This is essentially a bone that represents the floor where the brainstem itself is going to be located, which contains all of your vital life centers. So very important structure. And then there's one fourth point that I want you to identify. You might notice that this one particular bone here is actually bigger than all of the other ones that are supposed to be like that. It's supposed to be that way. It's because this is the body of the C2 vertebra, and it forms a pivot point so that we're actually able to rotate our head like this. And just find where the bottom point right there is going to be. So I'm going to be referencing these 4 points as you can do a few little measurements on your own and on your own MRI to see if there might be some kind of issue that's going on that could explain some of the symptoms you're experiencing. All right, now what I needed to do was get rid of those points, otherwise it wasn't going to work on my software. So the first point, or the first line that we want to draw, is going to be a line across the very base of that opening at the base of the skull. Don't worry about the length there. You're going to be looking for the relationship of the various structures right here. In particular, you want to be looking at the base of the cerebellum located right here. It should be approximately 2 millimeters above this line. If it is lower than 2 millimeters, it's where part of the brainstem is starting to actually descend a little bit and can start putting a little bit of physical mechanical pressure in this particular area. Imagine, if you would, that you wear a size 10 shoe and you're trying to fit your foot into a size 9 or a 9.5. You can do it, but it will create more pressure. Now, I will emphasize that as you do this, you may want to slide your slices a little bit there. Now, my line disappeared, but you can see that as I go off to the side here, if I was going to draw another line from those same points across like this, that actually ever so slightly off to the side, that black spot right there is not actually 2 millimeters above that point at all. And this can be what's known as cerebellar tonsillar ectopia. From a medical pathology standpoint, that's often not diagnosed as a condition known as a Chiari malformation until this little black thing is actually 5 millimeters all the way down here. Point being is it doesn't have to be all the way down here to actually be creating issues. Some of the things that can create this, number one is just our normal anatomy. Number two is if we've ever had a whiplash injury that's damaged some of the ligaments in this area, and as a consequence, you actually have mechanical tension where the base of the cerebellum starts to descend into that spot. And again, that can show up as blurry eyes, vertigo, headaches, migraines, all kinds of really, really nasty things there. And again, this relationship oftentimes is not looked at or even considered unless a person has that part of the brain that's actually herniated all the way down into their upper neck by a total of 5 millimeters. There should be, if you are actually healthy, a much wider margin of error. So what we're going to do now is measure an angle. We're going to measure it from the top part of that bone that, is the floor of the brainstem to the front opening of the base of the skull to the back opening of the base of the skull. And you might be able to see there that says about 118 degrees. This angle here should be somewhere between 115 to about 130, 135 for the average person. So the problem is if it is either too much or too little. Firstly, if the angle is too large, this is a condition that's known as Platybasia. This has nothing to do with your fault. This is not an injury or anything like that. This is simply put the shape of your skull. It means that the shape of the floor of the base of your skull is slightly flatter. As a consequence of that, it means that it's more likely where you can actually have part of that brainstem start to herniate downward into that opening, that Chiari malformation, as I had just mentioned. And what that means is it means you haven't done anything wrong, but it means that average person might be able to get away with this much stress on their head and their neck, but you may only be able to get away with this much stress. Therefore, any injury you've ever had to the upper part of the neck, it's all the more important that you get that properly diagnosed and properly treated so that things can ultimately stabilize, because you have to be that much more careful in your life. Now, if this angle is going to be less than 115 degrees, this suggests a condition that's known as a basilar kyphosis. In brief, as the brainstem starts to become the spinal cord at this level right here, you see that it actually makes a bit of a turn right here. As it does that, it's a difference between is it making a nice gradual turn versus is there a sharp turn. Same kind of thing. This is not always a matter of you having done anything wrong. If this is just your normal bony anatomy, your margin of error is much smaller. And again, if you've had some kind of an injury to the joints of your upper neck, it's all the more important that you're able to get that properly addressed, properly stabilized. You can't change your bone structure, but if you can change and improve the normal mobility of that area and allow it to stabilize, you don't have to experience the same severity, the same frequency, ideally, reduction of both those kinds of symptoms. The last angle that we're going to draw, it's measuring the same kind of thing. So we measure it from the top of that bone at the base of the head to the base of the opening at the front part of the skull to the very tip bottom of that C2 vertebra. And I'm actually going to drag it back just a little bit like this so that you can see. Aha. So this angle here, I'm measuring at 142 degrees. So this is something that's known as a clivoaxial angle. Clivus is the name of this bone here. Axis is the name of the C2. It should be between about 150 and 165 degrees. When it is greater than that, that again suggests that you may have that flattening effect of the base of the skull, which means it's more likely that you can have a herniation of that base of the brainstem or the cerebellum right there. If it is less than 150, as it is in this person's case, it means that you've got that basilar kyphosis. You have that sharp angle that's occurring right through that particular area there. And again, you may not be able to change your anatomy. However, if you are able to address whatever kinds of issues are going on in the neck, it doesn't have to create the same kinds of symptoms. Now, granted, it may not be 100% resolution. And as you can see here, this person, again, they have had, as we see, physical damage, physical injuries to the joints of their neck. When people say that they have degenerative arthritis, arthritis is not because a person is getting older. They've had a physical injury that's damaged and created excess mobility through the joints in the neck. Therefore, what we need to do is we need to make sure that things are actually moving the right way so that things can restabilize. Granted, if things are severe enough, it might require surgery, especially if you're dealing with cord impingement. This person's probably a borderline case. But if a person doesn't have that degree of impingement, if instead you can work with a properly qualified practitioner in a way that actually promotes the stability of the joints of the neck, restoring the normal motion, again, your body is able to oftentimes compensate even when there's a large amount of damage. And if you can give it even a couple millimeters worth of extra wiggle room, it often is like, oh, thank goodness. we can work with that. Things can get better. So thank you guys for watching this video here. Again, this is a video that in some ways I really don't like having to do. I don't like it where people have to do their own research to find out what's going on in their own body. But I do hope that if you're looking for answers, that this may at the very least give you an opportunity to look at a few things from a little bit more detailed view so that it can help direct you and ultimately direct the course of your healthcare. Thanks for watching. This is Dr.